You're listening to All In. This is the podcast dedicated to helping you fulfill the mission of God in your life and around the world. I'm your host, Jeff Roper. Hey everybody, welcome to this week's episode of All In. I so appreciate the fact that you take time out of your busy life to spend a few minutes with me as we explore fulfilling the mission of God in your life and around the world. This week, I'd like to talk to you about 5 ways your church can be relevant to global missions, regardless of the size or the location. Let me tell you how I got started in global missions. I was pastoring a local church in Enumclaw, Washington. Enumclaw is not the kind of place you would think about when you think about being relevant to global missions. It's a small town in the foothills of Mount Rainier in Washington State. And it's a small town for a reason. People want it that way. One of the most popular bumper stickers I would see around town said, "Help save Enumclaw. When you leave, take someone with you." Now, this was not global thinking. This wasn't kingdom thinking. This was hide yourself in your little group and bar the doors, bar the gates. There'll be dangers out there. Let's stay away from the world. But pastoring in this little town, God had birthed a global vision in our heart. And we made some intentional decisions that we would be relevant to global missions. And in those 23 years that Debbie and I were honored to serve as pastors of that local church, that church gave generously to global missions. It made a critical difference in planting churches in places like the Philippines, where we saw some churches get planted, all the way over to pioneering and developing what became the Foursquare Church of Russia. All of it was done because that little church out in Enumclaw made some big decisions that had some big results. Now I want you to imagine this. God has issued to you and to me and to every one of us that are followers of Jesus Christ, He's given us the commandment to put our hand to the plow and don't look back. We together are part of the greatest conspiracy in the history of the world. God's plan to upright a world that has fallen over. And He's doing that through Jesus Christ and His body. God is doing amazing things. And so whether you are in a global city like London or Los Angeles, Frankfurt, Amsterdam, St. Petersburg, New York, or if you're pastoring and you're living in a small little town like Chinnor in Oxfordshire in England, or Staromeshevskaya in Russia, or even back in Enumclaw, Washington, it really doesn't matter where you are, the size of your congregation, the size of your community. It doesn't matter, because every single one of us have been called to have a part in this global mission. See, mission work is not the work of a missionary. It is the work of the body of Christ. And all of those cities that I just mentioned to you, both the global cities and the small little towns, these are all cities and communities where I have kingdom relationships, vibrant ministry partners in all of these places who are engaged with us in doing the Great Commission. Here's what I want you to see, is that you will be amazed at what happens when you throw your obedience into the cause of global missions. You'll be amazed at what happens on the field and in your house. In fact, I believe that one of the ways, my personal conviction, one of the ways that you can completely revitalize your church is to get your church involved in global mission. If you're a pastor, and I know I have pastors from around the world that listen to this podcast, I hear from you, I talk with you. You're pastoring that little church, and you have a dream in your heart that is far bigger than the congregation in front of you. Well, I want to tell you something, dear friend. That is because you have a kingdom heart, you have a kingdom vision, and the Holy Spirit is living inside of you, giving life to that. And so you have something bigger inside of you, and I want to help you get that out to fulfill what God has placed inside of your own heart. I want to give you 5 practical steps that I've shared with pastors, because I always get asked this when I'm teaching in conferences and seminars or having coffee with a pastor. They say, what can we do to be relevant to global mission? Here are 5 things that I always outline for them. First one is to set aside 7 minutes to change the world. Here's what I mean. Designate one Sunday a month in your monthly worship cycle to dedicate that to global mission. During this time, you'll pray for global hotspots, you'll pray for missions, and then you will also receive a missions offering that will go to help support global missions. It'll take you about 7 minutes to do this. Do it one Sunday a month, and a lot of pastors I know set aside the third Sunday of the month. It doesn't matter which one, just set aside one. And you'll be amazed at what happens when you set aside one Sunday a month to gather the congregation together, saying now this is Mission Sunday. Let's look at this particular hotspot, and there are plenty of places you can focus in on, and maybe you've got a country or a region or a people group that's near and dear to your heart. I know other churches that every month it's a different focus. The whole thing, though, is to help cultivate and develop within the heart of the people God's love for this world, how He was working to bring all people into a relationship with Himself through Jesus Christ. And if you do this once a month, you will be amazed at what happens in the hearts of your people. And then receive an offering for that global mission. Now, I'm speaking normally within the context of the Foursquare church planting movement. And we've got churches in more than 130 nations, about 70,000 churches that have been planted because we're a missions movement. So normally the people that are listening to this are generally in some way connected to that Foursquare movement. But if you're not, hey, it doesn't matter. Apply this in how you are functioning and what you're doing in your own context and where God has called you. But within the Foursquare family, we have missionaries. We have two sending models that we use. One is people like myself who oversee large areas of responsibility are funded through a global mission fund. And that is our corporate assignment as a Foursquare family to reach the nations. And so that Global Mission Fund helps fund apostolic leaders and people who are pioneering and developing and cultivating church planting movements, typically in multiple nations, typically overseeing large swaths of territory. And then we have individual missionaries who are called to a specific location, to a specific city, to a specific task, and they are funded through friends, family members, local churches that rally to them and support them specifically individually. And these are not in competition with one another. These are complementary to one another. So if you're a Foursquare church, my recommendation is, and you can do whatever you want to do, obviously, but my recommendation is that one Sunday a month, designate that offering to the Global Mission Fund and let that be used to advance the gospel of Jesus Christ to the four corners of the earth. And you'll be funding out of that more than 30 different missionaries who are doing great kingdom work. It's a great resource to be able to invest into. And so do that one Sunday a month, and then also connect with individual missionaries. We have specific missionaries, over 100 serving throughout the world. Be connected with them, praying for them, adopt them. Say, you know what, this is going to be our missionary. We're going to pray for them. So I tell you this, folks, missionaries can be lonely, and it's good to know that they have churches praying for them back on the home front. To be apostolic is twofold. One, it means that you are sent to a people, but it also means you are sent from a people. So get connected with missionaries who are serving on the front line. So set aside 7 minutes to change the world. The second thing is connect with missionaries. The third thing I would recommend is that you set aside a portion of your monthly budget that goes to supporting the specific missionaries and projects in nations that God has placed on the heart of your local congregation. I mentioned to you, I'm speaking within a Foursquare context. So I'm Let me speak about that a little bit more. Not only if you're a Foursquare pastor, you have to wrestle through this whatever way it's going to mean something to you. But did God call you to be a Foursquare pastor of a Foursquare church? If He did, then you have part of a calling as a Foursquare church, and that, my opinion, is wonderfully expressed through that global mission fund. That is your way of saying we are part of what God is doing in this global Foursquare family. But you also, as a local congregation, have a very specific calling to fulfill in the Great Commission. And that's what you need to spend your budget on. This is my opinion, of course. But I would recommend that you set aside in your monthly budget from your tithes and offerings a percentage of that you are saying to individual missionaries and projects, this is what Jesus has assigned to us as a local church to be specifically responsible for in the fulfillment of the Great Commission, so that you have both the free will offering of the people giving to the global assignment that we have as a movement, and then the specific manifestation of your own calling and specific assignment in Jesus Christ to fulfill the Great Commission. So you set aside part of your budget for that. The fourth thing that I would recommend for your church is that you figure out ways to weave mission through every aspect and department of your church. I thoroughly believe that God placed the love and call of global missions in my heart when I was just a little boy of about 5 or 6 years of age, growing up in a small little town of probably less than 200 people in the backwoods of Alabama. And we attended a Southern Baptist church. And let me tell you, as someone who grew up in the South, there are more Baptists in the South than there are people. But one thing you got to love about the Baptists is, man, they have a love for global missions. And they wove missions through every department in the church. And every Sunday, our little church would, in Sunday school, would have a missions offering. And every little kid would, bring their little nickels and dimes and quarters and dollars, and they would pray for missions, and they would put that coin in the offering that we would receive in the Sunday school class. And every Sunday before we left for church, I would say, "Mama, I need a quarter for the missions offering." And I was so excited every Sunday to go and drop that little quarter in the missions offering. And that started something growing in my heart. So I don't know what programs you might have at your church, women's Bible studies, men's fellowships, uh, Sunday schools, if you have those, whatever it is that you have, weave global mission into every aspect of it, so that you are praying for missions, that you are giving them opportunity to invest into global mission, and even pushing it eventually to where they personally may get involved in global mission of some sort through adopting projects or even going on a short-term mission trip. But mobilize every department and every ministry to focus on the harvest, because Jesus Christ has called us to be agents of the mission of God, that the local church is the agent of God's mission. The field is the world. The field isn't the church. The field is the world. And the church is the agent. And you want to mobilize every aspect of that agent, from the youngest to the oldest, to be fully engaged in the mission of God. And the fifth thing that I would recommend that you do is that you would send and sustain workers. Now, this may include the fact that you might need to consider becoming a missionary. I have talked with pastors that are sensing a transition in their life, and they start thinking about, well, should I go pastor another church somewhere? Well, if you're sensing a time of transition in your life, consider becoming a missionary, especially if you've got senior leadership experience in a local church, or you've planted churches before. You might want to consider becoming a missionary and going to the frontiers where they have no one serving. But also, if God doesn't call you to that, now don't do it if God didn't call you, but if you are to stay pastoring in your local church, serving in a local congregation, find ways to connect and send and support sustaining missionaries one of the things that I've experienced personally as someone who oversees more than 20 missionary couples is it's very, very common for them to rally a bunch of excitement about the fact that they are going to the field, and then once they get to the field after 1 or 2 years, if they're not very diligent, very careful, it's very easy, out of sight, out of mind, and they lose that connection back with the home church. Well, Pastor, part of, if I can be so blunt, part of your assignment is to care for those that you send out and to be able to be fully involved, sustaining them, praying for them, supporting them, making sure that they're taken good care of through prayer, relationship, all of those things. And if you'll do these 5 things, if you will set aside one Sunday a month to pray for missions and receive an offering, if you will connect with missionaries, if you will set aside a portion of your monthly budget to support missions, if you will mobilize every mission department to get involved in global mission, and if you will sustain workers on the field, if you'll do those things, you will be amazed at what God does in you, in your local church, and through you to transform nations. Who knows, maybe you will get to open up, be involved in developing healthy church planting movements in the far corners of this world. Now, the work, it needs to be done. So let's get going. The harvest is ripe. Hey, if you've enjoyed this podcast, would you mind doing a few favors for me? One is subscribe in iTunes. That way you'll never miss an episode when we post these on a almost weekly basis. If it's been helpful to you, share it with your friends and your family. Post it on Facebook, or send an email to somebody. Say, hey, this was really encouraging. This might help you. And then, thirdly, if you believe in what we're doing in cultivating healthy church planting movements throughout the new dark continent of Europe, and you benefit from this podcast. So if you believe in what we're doing and you benefit from the podcast, would you consider becoming a supporter? You can go to jeffroper.com and click on that bright orange button, and it'll tell you how you can become a partner with us. Hey, God bless you guys. Talk to you soon.
Well, we're done now. Thanks for listening. This is Jeff Roper reminding you that the mission of God is too grand for mediocrity or average living. You were created for a purpose, and that purpose is found in the mission of God. It's your life. Now go live it.